Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Tariq Amin, lecturer, Department of English, Kohat University of Science and Technology, Kohat. Our today's topic is reading techniques, extensive and intensive reading. This is the lecture number 14th of the course Communication Skills. The course code is ENG 134. Lecture outlines include extensive reading, strengths or advantages of extensive reading, shortcomings or disadvantages of extensive reading, intensive reading, strengths, advantages of intensive reading, shortcomings or disadvantages of intensive reading, and at the very end of the class we will discuss some of the differences between extensive and intensive reading. Learning objectives are the students will be able to know about extensive and intensive reading, and they will also be able to understand the basic differences between extensive and intensive reading. Let's start the class. What is extensive reading? Extensive reading involves reading texts for enjoyment and to develop general reading skills. Most of the time, we apply this strategy, the strategy of extensive reading, when we try to get a pleasure out of a particular text, and when we try to develop our general reading skills, we apply this strategy of extensive reading. That is why it is sometimes called reading for joy, because we read different texts for enjoyment purposes. To read extensively is to read as much as possible without concerning oneself with the meaning of the unknown word. When we read a text intensively, we try to read as much as possible. We try to read more and more. And when in extensive reading, we are not concerned with the meaning of each and every word. When we come across difficult words, we are not concerned with the meaning of each and every word. We are not concerned with the meaning of each and every phrase, each and every clause, and each and every sentence. We are just concerned with the meaning. Easy reading materials. We read material that is easy for us. Reading for enjoyment or information purposes. Most of the time we read text intensively for enjoyment purposes. Sometimes we also read different texts extensively for information purposes as well. We read novels, we read dramas, we read short stories, we read poetry for the purpose of enjoyment, and sometimes we read newspaper, and sometimes we read different posts for the purpose of information. So we apply this strategy of extensive reading when our purpose is enjoyment, or our purpose is to take information. Extensive reading, in extensive reading, learners choose what they want to read. In extensive reading, the students have freedom to select any text of their own choice, so they are free to select anything. They select and they choose what they want to read. Learners read as much as possible. They try to read more and more. Faster reading. Extensive reading is faster reading. You can read lengthy text in a much shorter time. So it is faster reading. It is faster because you are not concerned with minute details of phrases, sentences, and clauses. Your main aim is to just derive the main meaning, or the central meaning, or the key ideas from the text. You are just concerned with the general understanding or the general meaning of the text. That is why it is faster reading. Requiring a low expenditure of mental effort. This obviously require low expenditure of mental effort, because you don't focus on each and everything. You just try to get the general meaning of a text. Objectives of extensive reading are: number one, to develop habit of self-study in the students. This is one of the objectives. It helps students develop the habit of self-study. It also enables the students to understand the meaning of the given passage as early as possible. So they try to understand the meaning of different passages as early as possible. To increase the passive vocabulary of the students. It also increases the passive vocabulary of the student. There are two types of vocabulary. The first one is active vocabulary, the second one is passive vocabulary. So extensive reading increases the passive vocabulary of the student, not the active vocabulary of the students. Intensive reading increases the active vocabulary of the students, whereas extensive reading increases the passive vocabulary of the students. Important aspects of extensive reading. Text must be interesting. This is very much important point, that a text that you select for extensive reading must be interesting. You should select a text that is interesting. You should not select a text that is boring. Boring text should be avoided. You should select a text that is very much interesting, so that you may not get bored very soon. So try to select a text that is interesting. For example, you can select novels. Novels are interesting texts. You can select dramas. Dramas are also interesting texts. Short stories are interesting texts. So try to select texts that are interesting. Text must be level appropriate. It means that you should select a text that is according to your level, that is appropriate for your level. For example, there are different texts that have been written for different levels. For the students of grade 5, different texts are written, and for the students of masters, different texts have been written, and for MPhil scholars and PhD scholars, different kinds of texts have been written. So you should select a text that is according to your level. If you select a text that is not according to your level, that is that has been written for the students of upper level, you would not be able to understand the meaning of that text, and you will get bored very soon. That is why it is said that you should select a text that is level appropriate, that is according to your level. Text must be of moderate length. This is also important, that you should select a text that is of moderate length. You should not select lengthy text, and you should not select very short text. You should select a text of moderate length. For example, you can select a text of 5 pages, 6 pages, and 8, 9, 10 pages. These are moderate lengths. You can read them easily. Now let's come to advantages of extensive reading. Extensive reading helps widen the vocabulary of the students. We discussed this point in the previous slide, that extensive reading increases the passive vocabulary of the students. So it helps widen the vocabulary of the students. Inculcates the habit of self-study in the students. Yes, it helps students develop the habit of self-study. The habit of self-study is very much important in when you are reading something, or when you are when you read for your examination purposes, or you read for you do preparation for some tests. So the habit of self-study is very much important. Finish books in reasonable time. This extensive reading helps you finish books or finish different texts, finish different assignments in a reasonable time. Provides us pleasure. This is what we have discussed in the first slide, that extensive reading provides us pleasure. Most of the time we read text extensively for enjoyment purposes, for pleasure purposes. Now there are some disadvantages of extensive reading as well. In extensive reading, language learning autonomy is needed. No short-term outcome. In extensive reading, we don't have short-term outcome, and we need language learning autonomy is needed in extensive reading. They are free to select anything, and when they are free to select anything, there are chances that they might select a text that is not of their level or that is not of their use. So it is sort of, we can say that it is one of the disadvantages of extensive reading. Selecting materials is difficult. When you select a text for yourself for extensive reading, it becomes difficult for you to select a text because you are free to select anything. Sometimes you feel difficulty in selecting a text for extensive reading. For example, uh, you when you think of selecting a text for enjoyment purposes, let's say novel, there are many novels. For let's say dramas, there are many dramas. Stories, there are many stories have been written. So when you select a text for enjoyment purposes, for extensive reading, you face some difficulties. Vocabulary, grammar. In the previous slides, we discussed that extensive reading helps us improve our vocabulary. But in comparison to intensive reading, this technique of reading, which is extensive reading, does not develop our vocabulary that much and does not help us improve our grammar that much as compared to intensive reading. We will discuss the same point in intensive reading. In intensive reading, yes, because we say it is said that it does not help us improve grammar. It does not help us improve our vocabulary or enhance our vocabulary or build our vocabulary, because in extensive reading we do come across different uh, grammatical construction. We do come across different new words, but we don't focus upon the meaning of individual words. We don't focus upon the structure of different phrases and sentences. We just read them and we just try to get meaning from that. that is why it is that is why we said that this technique or this method improves our passive vocabulary, not active vocabulary. Lack of feeling of learning English. When you apply this strategy of reading, you feel that you are not learning English, but you are learning English, but you feel that you are not learning English. Intensive reading, this is the second strategy, second technique, or second reading style, that is intensive reading. It means that you take a text, you just take a text. You might take a text of 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages. You might take your academic text, you might take novel, drama, story. And what do you do after that? First of all, you take a text, study it line by line. Very much important point. You study it line by line. You focus upon each and every word. You focus on the meaning of each and every word, spelling of each and every word. You focus upon each and every phrase, the meaning of each and every phrase, and the structure of each and every phrase. You focus on the structure of each and every clause. You focus on the meaning of each and every clause, and you focus upon the structure of each and every sentence, the meaning of each and every sentence, and the grammatical construction of each and every sentence, the sentence structure of each and every sentence. So you study it line by line. Refer it every moment to the dictionary about the grammar of the text itself. When you come across different words, you come across different phrases, you come across different sentences, what do? You refer to dictionary. You refer to the dictionary for the meaning of word, for the grammar of sentences, grammar of phrases, and grammar of clauses, and grammar of sentences. So you consult dictionary for that. So this is intensive reading. You take a text, you study it line by line, you study it word by word, you study it phrase by phrase. You study each and every thing. You study the minute detail of each and every word, each and every phrase, each and every clause, and each and every text. And when you find difficulty, you face difficulty in understanding a text, in understanding a word, or in understanding a sentence or a clause, you consult dictionary for that. You consult different people for that. You consult dictionary for that. To read extensively is to completely deconstruct a text. When you read a text extensively, you completely deconstruct it. You completely analyze. Complete deconstruction means that you study each and everything with the goal of absorbing as much meaning from it as possible, because your focus is to obtain, to derive your, or to get as much meaning as possible. Important aspects of intensive reading include text must be interesting. Once again, the text that you are reading intensively must be interesting, because if you select a boring text, you won't be able to maintain your concentration. You won't be able to get more out of it. You won't be able to get or derive more meaning out of it, because you would get bored very soon. So you should select a text that is interesting. Text must be short. Yes, text must be short, because intensive reading takes lots of time. And if you select a text of select a text of 40 pages, 50 pages, or you select a very lengthy text, you might not be able to complete its reading. You might not be able to derive more and more meaning out of it. So you should select a text that is short, so that you may not get bored, and you may be able to get more and more meaning out of it. You may be able to derive more and more meaning out of it. The most mental energy. You should intensively read different texts when you have the most mental energy. When you have the most mental energy, then you should apply the strategy of intensive reading. Read for brief periods of time, especially to avoid mental exhaustion. And if you want to avoid mental exhaustion, you should read for brief periods of time. Objectives of intensive reading are: the first one is to make a detailed study of words, phrases, word order, and expressions. This is the objective. We have discussed it that in intensive reading, your focus or your objective is to study the words, phrases, clauses, word order, the meaning of different phrases, clauses, and sentences, and different expressions in detail. So you make a detailed study of these different aspects of language. To enable the students to comprehend the text, its sense and meaning. Yes, so when you read a text intensively, it helps you understand the meaning, the sense of the text. You comprehend a text completely when you apply the strategy of intensive reading. It also enables the students to improve their English language. This is obvious that when you read a text intensively, it helps you improve your vocabulary, it helps you improve your knowledge of English grammar, and as a result, it helps you improve your English language. To encourage the students to gather information from the text. Yes, we try to gather more and more information from a text when we read a text intensively. So it encourages the students to gather more and more information from the text that they are reading. Now, the advantages of intensive reading are: it enriches our vocabulary, it improves our grammar, because in intensive reading we focus upon vocabulary, we focus upon grammar, and then we focus upon the different expressions as well, so it improves our power of expression as well. It develops the skill of questioning and answering as well, because when you read something extensively, different questions come into your mind, so you ask different questions and you answer your question from the text. So the advantages are, it enriches our vocabulary, it improves our grammar, it improves the power of expression, and it develops the skill of questioning and answering. It helps remember dates and facts also. Disadvantages, its process is long and boring. Yes, this process is very much lengthy and this process is very much boring. Reader gets bored very soon when he or she applies this strategy of intensive reading, because it requires our most mental energy. It seldom imparts joy and pleasure, whereas extensive reading imparts joy and pleasure, but this intensive reading does not impart joy and pleasure. The students are interested in this method only for the point of view of examinations. They apply this very strategy when they prepare themselves for their examination. They apply this method only for the purpose of, only from the point of view of examinations. Comparison between intensive and extensive reading. Let's discuss some of the points. The very first point is intensive reading concentrates upon the language aspect. It concentrates upon vocabulary, words, phrases, clauses, and sentences. In short, it concentrates upon, or it focuses upon the language aspect of a text. Whereas extensive reading does not concentrate upon language aspect, but it concentrates upon the subject matter. It concentrates upon the meaning of a text. In intensive reading, the aim is to make a careful and minute study of what is read, whereas in extensive reading, you are not concerned with the minute detail of each and everything. You are just concerned with grasping the meaning of what is read. You try your level best to grasp the meaning of what you are reading. The third point is words, phrases, and expressions are studied in detail. Whereas in extensive reading, we are not concerned with studying words, phrases, and expressions in detail. We are just concerned with the subject matter. We are just concerned with the meaning of a text. The fourth point is new words and phrases that you come across in a text pass into pupils' active vocabulary. We have discussed this point in the previous slide, that the different phrases, new words, vocabulary that you come across in a text become the part of your active vocabulary and pass into your active vocabulary, whereas new words and phrases occurring in the book are occurring in a text passed into the students' passive vocabulary. In short, intensive reading increases our active vocabulary, extensive reading increases our passive vocabulary. These are references. Thank you very much for listening to the video. Allah